Before the roads belonged to men, they belonged to older giants. Before castles rose above the sea, before clan banners crossed the mountains, before the shogunate wrote its laws in ink and blood, the great beasts had already marked the land with their passage. They knew the valleys before the valleys had names, crossed the rivers before bridges were built, and climbed the ridges before watchtowers looked down from them. In those days, Japan was not held together by swords alone. It was held by roads, bells, shrines, seasons, and the memory of where the giants walked. The foolish called them monsters, the wise called them neighbors. That was the beginning of the old compact. When the spring winds came down from the mountains, the riders were sent before the courts had finished arguing. They were not hunters, and they were not soldiers marching to battle. They were couriers, trained for speed, silence, and judgment, carrying the words that kept the roads open before fear could become panic, and before ambition could become war. Among them rode one young samurai, trusted with a sealed message bound in bamboo and cord. He had been trained as a warrior, as all samurai are, but this journey demanded more than courage. The message had to cross the country before the migration closed the mountain roads. If it failed, villages would be cut off from grain, ports would wait for cargo that never came, and shrines would ring their bells too late. In the castle courts, men who had never walked the old roads would hear rumors instead of truth. They would call for armies to solve what patience might have prevented. So the courier rode across wind and blossom, across stone paths and forest gates, across places where the land narrowed and the older giants moved according to laws no lord had written. His mount was no common beast of burden. It was trained for the courier roads, fast in the dust, steady on the ridge, calm beneath thunder, and loyal to the hand that did not misuse it. A rider who feared such power could never guide it, and a rider who loved power too much would be destroyed by it. That was the first lesson of the old compact. The dinosaurs were not enemies of the shogunate. They were part of the order that made the shogunate possible. Their migrations fed the grasslands. Their paths shaped the roads. Their presence kept men humble before the world they claimed to govern. The bells were raised for them, the bridges were placed around them, and the villagers learned when to open their gates, when to close their storehouses, when to wait, and when to move. To live beside the giants was to accept that not every force in the world could be commanded. Some forces could only be understood, but there were always men who forgot. A lord behind stone walls could look at a map and see only territory. A road could become a line to be straightened, a valley could become a prize, and a migration path could become an inconvenience. Such men did not hear the ground before it trembled. They did not see the farmers watching the sky. They did not know why the shrine bells faced the passes, or why the old riders slowed before entering a grove. They saw patience and called it weakness. They saw restraint and called it fear. And when their orders reached the provinces, the old balance began to bend. That was the burden carried in the sealed message. Not merely command, but warning. Not merely law, but memory. The courier rode with that knowledge against his back. He passed beneath gates built for men and beside trees older than the clans that claimed them. He crossed shores where the sea wind carried salt across the armor cords. He climbed through mist where the road disappeared and only the breathing of the mount told him the world was still beneath him. At times, the giants moved near enough to shake the stones. At times, their shadows crossed the road like passing weather. The weapon at a warrior's side can make a man feel prepared for any danger. But the old giants obeyed no threat and recognized no rank. No order could turn a herd from its path. No decree could command the season, and no shout could quiet the earth. So the courier learned to listen. He listened to the feet beneath him, to the wind in the grass, to the silence before a bell, and to the shift of the mount's neck when it sensed what the rider could not yet see. This was the harder discipline, to move quickly without breaking the road beneath him, and to carry power without mistaking it for command. One road closed too soon, one village waited too long. One patrol blocked a path that should never have been blocked. A single mistake in the mountains could become hunger in the fields. Hunger could become anger. Anger could become revolt. And revolt could bring armies into valleys where armies had no wisdom. A samurai may be judged by how he faces an enemy. But in the old days, the greater test was how he treated power that was not his to own. The road opened because he read the land. The message survived because he knew the difference between urgency and ruin. Across the country, life moved by the same fragile rhythm. In the courts, officials argued beneath painted beams, believing the realm was held together by decrees. In the fields, farmers knew better. They watched the ridgelines, listened for bells, and knew which paths belonged to carts, which belonged to riders, and which belonged to the giants when the season turned. At the ports, ropes tightened and sails waited for roads to clear inland. At the shrines, priests kept the old calendars. In the villages, children learned not to fear every shadow and not to approach every wonder. The country was not one road. It was all roads. Castle Road and Farm Road, Pilgrim Road and Courier Road, Mountain Pass and Harbour Path, Stone Stair and Muddy Track. Each one depended on the others. Each one depended on the compact. The court wrote the law, the riders carried it, the farmers lived beneath it, and the bells defended it. And the giants moved through it all, older than judgment, older than loyalty, older than the names men carved into gates. By the time the message reached the final road, it was no longer only the burden of one courier. It had passed through dust, blossom, rain, and stone. It had crossed the breadth of the mountains and the salt of the sea. It had become a warning carried by bells, by riders, by villagers, and by every person who understood what would be lost if pride ruled the roads. Some say the courier arrived before sunset. Some say the bells carried the warning farther than any rider could. Some say the mount reached the last hill with its sides heaving and its head still high, as if it too understood that the country had been spared. What matters is this: the road was not forced. The herd was not broken. The villages were not abandoned. The armies did not come. And the message was heard in time. So the shogunate endured for another season, not because it conquered the ancient world, not because its castles were high, not because its armor was bright, and not because its lords were wise. It endured because one rider crossed the land without forgetting what the land was. Because one warrior trained for violence understood that the blade was not the answer. Even the oldest world can forgive mankind if mankind learns to pass through it gently.